What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another Nomad Hedge market update video. So in today's video, we're going to have a look at the major indices and we're going to take a look at the VIX, the treasury yields, and the dollar index. I'm going to try to make this video a little bit shorter, but I think it's going to get a little bit long. So right in front of us, actually we have the S&P here, but I do want to start off with taking a look at the breadth of the market. We can see broader participation here. We're looking at stocks above the 50-day, the 200-day, and the 20 MA as well. So we're above the threshold of 50, which is what we want, and the 20 MA is above 60. So this is great news so far. We're seeing so many bullish moves here in the markets. And so if we move on here and take a look at the VIX, I mean, you can see here basically the VIX has been absolutely crushed. You know, we see this this was actually a symmetrical triangle I was looking at, potentially that we could see another leg up here along with a rising dollar, but in fact we got the crossover here and breaking down from this channel. Now if we take a look at this lower high trend line, we're looking at this one, right? So we tested it this was actually back in May of 2023, and now we're completely below it. Now if this is going to act as resistance from now on, then I mean that would just be more bullish moves for the markets. So it depends how far this one could go, but if you take a look at the VIX here on a monthly chart, I mean we're breaking below the low here, so we're just looking at levels here. And I mean, take a look at this. Back in 2018 the VIX was at, you know, below 9. So is it possible that this thing could just keep going down here with the rising market now, broader participation? Maybe, yeah. So I mean, this would be a level to watch here. We're looking at a VIX at around, you know, 11 and a half. And so it's now important to watch this trend line here, because this needs to act as resistance if the VIX is going to stay below that level. So that was just a quick overview of the VIX. Let's move on and take a look at the yields now. We're going to start off with the 10-year here. And this thing is going according to plan. We see this impulse move here. So we're going to see yields starting to rise from current levels. I see another impulse here towards the upside. So I basically drawn a projection level here, and we're looking at the first target here at around 0.618, and then obviously this thing could go much higher. I mean, we're looking at 4%, maybe 4.3% as well. And if we take a look at this lower high trend line here, I do believe that we're going to break above it unless this one acts as resistance and pushes it down. So we'll just have to see. If we're above 0.618 here, we can see yields rising obviously, and that's going to indicate perhaps if the dollar is going to follow through here towards the upside. We're seeing the 2-year as well. We're looking at a projection level here at 0.618 now, and so we want to pay attention to these two because that could affect the dollar as well. And so speaking of the dollar here, let's take a look at how we're faring out. I believe that we're now consolidating now. If you take a look at the DXY here, typically wave 4 is taking longer to materialize compared to wave 2, so this thing could just move on sideways here, stuck at around 104. And that is why, you know, if you take a look at how the treasuries are faring out, they're also in their respective wave 4 correction. So these three in conjunction could move sideways from here, and that sort of like explains why the VIX is so down so much, because there's not so much volatility going on here in the yields and the dollar index. You know, not as much as that was previously here during this run here towards wave 3. So that was it with the VIX and the yields and the dollar. Let's move on here, take a look at the major indices here, and the S&P 500 continues to grind higher. And as you can see here, after we completed wave B here, we are now in an impulse phase here towards wave 3. Now wave 3 could end here at 1.272. It's a possibility. We left an open gap here about 3 days ago, so we could stall here at this level, although our projection here is favorable towards 1.618, but this normally acts as a resistance level. It's just that if we're above 1.618 or below it or right at that level, then wave 3 becomes normal. So for instance, if wave 3 is normal, then wave 5 could be extended. And if we're ending at 1.272, then it's probably a guarantee that wave 5 is going to be extended. So either way, we like it higher here, and this thing is, even if it corrects here or finds resistance here at either 1.272, 1.618, this thing is going to grind higher towards wave 5. And you know, this thing could go, we have a, you know, this is our ultimate target here. I mean, we're looking at 4,500 here. There's a high possibility. And if you draw a projection from AB, you're getting a 100% extension here towards 4,444. So I mean, if we found resistance here, we're going to see a pullback, and we're going to see the S&P continue to grind higher. So we're currently within this wave 3 pattern here, and we'll just have to see how far this one is go. So expect some resistance ahead here in the couple days ahead. And the same thing could be said with the Nasdaq, but I think the Nasdaq composite has stalled now right at this higher high trend line. And so if you take a look at this looks like an impulse here towards the upside. So this could have completed smaller degree wave 5. So we could see, if this thing finds resistance here at the 100% extension, then we would start to begin to see a you know, a correction for the Nasdaq 100. But again, I mean, just like the S&P, we do, if you draw a projection line from A to B, you're getting around, you know, 1400 here, or even 14,300 on the Nasdaq. So that's a possibility as well. There's an open gap here, so I think this could be an area here of interest that Nasdaq could find itself in. That's it with the Nasdaq. If we take a look at the NDX, for instance, we broke above this higher high trend line here, and so it just looks like it has stalled as well, right at the 100% projection. What this means is that if we're seeing a broader participation of the small caps, especially the ones in the Russell 2000, then we could see a rotation. So we could see the stocks in the Nasdaq starts to correct while the Russell 2000 is starting to gain momentum. And the same thing could be said with you know, the NYSE. Right. Overall, I think this is a bearish, you know, structure here. We could possibly see new lows here towards the downside. But if we're breaking above this lower high trend line, especially the high here, then we have to recount this whole Elliott wave structure here. So I'm keeping an eye on the NYSE because if we're seeing more broader participation here in the market, that means that you know, the most beaten down stocks are starting to gain momentum towards the upside, which kind of explains why the Russell 2000 is having such a big moves here recently. It was up almost 2.7% on Tuesday. So we have an initial target here. We're above that 100% extension if we project it from smaller degree wave 1, 2. And so we're looking at larger degree wave 3 here at around 1,895. Now we could also go up to 1924. I'm taking one resistance level at a time here. So even if we're finding resistance within these areas, we're going to correct and continue higher either way. So let's have a look at the Dow Transportation. So we're seeing here a failed breakout here, but that could be because there was an open gap right here. So we could possibly have just, you know, closed this open gap, and we could see this thing break out from this lower high trend line here. So if we take a look at the Dow resembles the Russell 2000, and so we're not seeing the same kind of momentum here, but it did in fact on June 2nd. We saw a big gain here, more than 2% here on the Dow. So maybe we'll see another just impulse here. We could have completed wave 3 here, correcting here to smaller degree wave 4, and this thing could take off to wave 5 of smaller degree. So that would then be an impulse here 5 ways towards wave C. Okay, so from current level, we're looking at perhaps, you know, if we draw this price range here, I mean, it's just going to be a 6% advance. But still, I mean, that just means that we have another move up a lot higher here. That's along with the S&P 500 and the Russell 2000. So the Nasdaq and the Nasdaq Composite most likely going to see some topping here, or at least we're going to see momentum fading for the Nasdaq, and we're going to see more of these strong gains for the Russell and the Dow Jones, and as well as the S&P 500. So while we're at it, let's also have a look at ARK Invest here. So this was one of those ETFs I had on my watch list here. One thing about ARK Invest is that if you missed out on Tesla, for instance, you could probably pile into ARK Invest, because this one has you know, much higher potential here short term, because this thing has just been beaten down. But the question now is if this correction here is an ABC, or perhaps if this is A and then B, and then we're gonna complete B here and then taking off, right? So I would be a little bit cautious adding a position here. We would have to wait for this one to pull back a little bit, because this thing doesn't look quite impulsive in my opinion. It looks a little bit corrective, so we keep an eye on this. If we're finding another alternative entry, I will tweet about it, and maybe I'll post it in another video later on. So ARK is one of those good ETFs here, showing bullish moves. Yeah, I mean, that was a quick overview here of the markets, and I believe we're going higher here, and we like it higher as well, because logically speaking this thing is going to continue. We're keeping an eye on the S&P and the other major indices, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care for now.